Well, over the years, it's been one of the joys of my life, being a person that loves the outdoor and loves the adventure, is to share those adventures with some of my dear friends. And no one more than a couple guys I've worked closely with for years, Jason Brewer and Kyle Wood. They're both in the house here during this service. And we've just gone on some pretty wild things that we've done over the years. But I want to tell you about one of the things that we did. Jason wasn't able to be on this one, but Kyle and I, in 2013, decided that we wanted to circumnavigate Grand Island up in the UP, up in Lake Superior. Does anybody know where that is? Anybody ever been on Grand Island? I'm just curious here in the house. Some of you have. That's cool. It's one of those hidden treasures up in the UP. So you see a little map here. So that X below is the top of the Upper Peninsula there. And then you'll see Grand Island, which is engulfed by Lake Superior. Now, if you've ever been to Lake Superior, if you've ever been in Lake Superior, you know that it's memorable. Let's just say it that way, all right? So Kyle and I decided that we would take this trip. You see some pictures here. So we hustled up there one night, got there, got across to the island, which is about a half mile off the shore, just at dusk. We had our headlamps up. We set up our stuff. So this was the boat I took, and this is a touring kayak. So it's meant for multiple day trips and something I'd never done, always wanted to do. So you got lots of storage room in here for different things. And so we packed in everything we needed for this multi-day adventure. You know, food. You got to have a little stove. You got to have some extra clothing, a futon, all the essentials. You know what I mean? Everything that would fit in there. And so we endeavored to make this trip, and we were told when we got up there, and if you've ever been to Pictured Rocks, you know it's right in the same area, and you can see Grand Island from there. We were told that when you get to the top, it's beautiful. That's where most of these pictures are taken from. You'd think you're in the Caribbean. The water is green. It was beautiful. The sun came out. We got up to the top, but we were told once you crest the top and then you come down on that east side, there is no place to stop. So if you get tired, just remember this. There is no place to stop. We were told that. We were reminded that. And I don't know what Kyle was thinking. I'm looking at Kyle right now, but I was thinking, well, there's got to be at least one place to stop. And I remember his words again. There's no place to stop. Now, on that northeast side there's 40, 50-foot sheer cliffs there. And so we get up to the top. We had lunch. It was great. It was wonderful. We're having a great time. Then we get to the top, and then we start to come south. And something weird happened where the wind just kicked in, and it was pushing north up into Superior. And we were coming south. And so every time you would get those paddles and you would paddle, and you'd stop paddling out of fatigue, you would immediately start going in reverse. And so we were going, and Kyle's quite a bit younger than me, so my goal is just to keep up with this nice, strong, young guy. And so I'm doing my best, and we're going, and he turned around every once in a while, doing okay? I'm like, I'm good, I'm perfect, I'm great. I'm dying inside. My arms are burning. I'm going, man. And I'd stop paddling just to get a breath, and all of a sudden you're moving backwards, and so you better pick it up again. So we're going, and both of us were starting to feel a little tired, and I noticed Kyle was looking for a place to stop, and we were looking for a place to stop. And the guy was right. There was no place to stop, I'm telling you. So we kept going, and finally we get to this point right in where you see that little red-pink arrow there, and it was our first place that we could kind of get our breath. And honestly, the wind was pushing us out, and probably wouldn't have taken long for us to just get swept up into Lake Superior. Now, for those of you who are here in the house and you see the size of the screen, I want you to imagine one dot or a few dots on the screen and the rest of it being water, because that's pretty much how, in proportion, Grand Island is in comparison to this massive, massive Lake Superior. And it was 150 miles. If we would have gotten pushed out into the water, it's 150 miles north to the other side. It's quite a ways. So we were there, and we got to this point, and we decided, are we going to stop and kind of set up camp for the night because we were just gassed, or do we want to cross over this little bay area? Now, we were in our boats talking about this, and I looked over And I could see the other side. And if you're in the water in a boat, it looks pretty close. I'm like, on the map, it's only this big. We'll be good. I said, what do you think, Kyle? And Kyle's like, I don't know. And with my power of persuasion, I said, let's just go for it. So that's when it got the worst. We started crossing over to this bay, and then the dark clouds rolled in, and the wind kicked up, and now we're going sideways against the wind. And I started really panicking because I thought, you just don't mess around with water. And those of us that live in Michigan, you know that. There should have a healthy respect for the water. But it felt like for a few moments that we weren't going to make it. That we wouldn't, especially for me, I wouldn't have the energy and the strength to get through. We eventually did. We set up our tents, and immediately started raining at about 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And we were so tired, we said, when it stops raining, we'll get up and have dinner. And we never woke up. We woke up the next morning and had dinner. But it felt like all of a sudden, all these elements around us were just surrounding us, and we didn't really know what we were going to do. And that's really the idea today, is what do you do when you feel that threatened feeling of your environment, where you feel like things are around you, and you feel like if you're in a boat, you feel like it's just about ready to flip over. I could have imagined, in my mind, I went through the scenario, what if one of us slips over in Lake Superior? How long would we survive in that cold water with no one around there, no cell service, everything working against us? And what do you do in your life when you feel like it's about to flip over? What do you do when you feel like you just might capsize and you don't know how long you might survive? And some of you might be in that situation right now. It's great to have a full house here. And it's great to have you with us on Daybreak Live. And we're going to talk about what happens when we're in that situation. Now, I want to stop for a minute and say this, that when I had my very first conversations with Wes, our founding pastor, and he asked me to consider would I think about being the pastor here. One of the things he said, you can continue to lead Never the Same, which is the ministry that I founded just a few days ago. Is our 12th anniversary. And this ministry is a national ministry that reaches out to students around the country. Tens of thousands of students have been impacted, hundreds of thousands, by the work that we've done and our team. And it's just been an incredible journey. And so the role that I'm playing these days in my life is to continue to oversee that mission. And when I had an interview with the elder board, that was the first thing on the agenda for both of us was, is God continuing to call you to lead Never the Same? And it was a very clear yes. And the elder board, there was a very clear yes from them as well. And so as your pastor, I want you to know that while my heart is fully here with you and with us on this journey together as a church family to reach our community and to reach the world with the good news of Jesus, my heart is also continuing to be burdened and broken for what's happening with our young people around the country. And what's unique about the position in which I stand now is I get to see it on a ground level, but also get to see it from a 30,000-foot view. And so here's why I'm saying all that to you today. Is because I want to invite you to something we're going to do next week here at Daybreak on Tuesday night. Some of you know about it. It's called Generations. It's an event that we do to raise support for this ministry to reach students. And in all the years that I've been involved in, over 30 years of working with students, it's never been more important than it is today to be reaching this generation with the love of Christ. They need it, and we need to give it to them. So this video will give you a little preview. And I want to invite you, it's next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock here at Daybreak. And if you're interested in more, come talk to me or go on our website. But here's a video to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. Never the Same is a national youth ministry that exists to see new generations transformed in Christ. All of our ministries are growing and changing students' lives. Here's what we do. Claim Your Campus, a student-led prayer movement in middle and high schools. NTS Camp, a summer experience for students. Soul Exercises, a curriculum like no other that's putting the Bible right at the center of youth ministries. Enlighten Students, student-led worship and prayer events right on site at school campuses. And the Grand Rapids Mud Run, a world-class 5K adventure race that helps our cause reach more students. But did you know that because of 2020, Never the Same almost closed its doors. But we chose to fight on. We've got a new fight in us for students. We've got new plans for old passions. This generation of students need Jesus. Join us as we share where God is leading Never the Same into the future. So I want to invite you personally to join us. You might be on Daybreak Live and you're here local, or you can join us for our live stream, but it'll be right here in this room next Tuesday night. And we're going to be sharing some exciting updates about where we're going. And I hope that you have one of these. If you don't, pick one of these up. This is the guide for this series called Thriller that we're in. And it's this idea of what do we do when we don't know what's right around the corner in our life. Just like a good movie with twists and turns, our lives are very much the same way. And so I want to encourage you, and I continue every week to hear stories about people that are in these guides, in the Bible every day. And it's a way to not only get a personal time with God, maybe even a family time, but also a time that we'll talk about here that gets us prepared, because we're going to, again, go from one of these readings. And we're looking at Mark chapter 4 today. Now, Mark is one of the four Gospels. And the four Gospels are all different accounts of the life and teachings of Jesus. Here's a little bit about each one, but I'm going to just talk for a second about the Gospel of Mark, because Mark is the shortest gospel. It's probably the first one. It's the source for all the other three that probably scholars would say were written after it. And what's really unique and wonderful about the Gospels, these four books in our Bible, is that they give us different angles from the life of Jesus, from the teachings of Jesus. And Mark is this book that uses the word immediately all the time. It says, immediately Jesus did this, and then immediately Jesus went here, and immediately Jesus went there. It reminds me of our modern world today, where we're always kind of in a hurry, because Mark is really in a hurry to tell us this story. And so we find here in Mark chapter 4, verse 35, here's what happens. So that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." So leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. And a furious squall came up, and waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. And the disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care?" Don't you care? I imagine them saying it very loudly with the noise of the storm around. Teacher, don't you care if we drowned? So he got up. He rebuked the wind and the waves. Quiet, be still. And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Jesus told them, "Get in the boat, we're going to the other side." Notice it was Jesus' idea to cross the lake. He was the one that said, "Let's go over to the other side." Now, Jesus had been teaching all day. He was tired. In fact, we know from the surrounding context of this story that there were so many people crowding towards Jesus that he said to some guys around there, "Let's give me a boat so I can come out from shore and not get pushed into the water, and I can back up a bit into the water." And he taught from the boat to this massive crowd of people. And then it says they took him. If you notice it, Mark gives us some really interesting details here. It says they took him just as he was, meaning that he went right immediately from teaching in this boat, all of a sudden now is going over. Did you notice where he was in the boat when he fell asleep? He was in the stern. Is that the front or the back? Boat people. It's the back. So he was in the back of the boat. Mark gives the detail that the other Gospels don't. He says he was sleeping on a cushion. It was an eyewitness to what's going on here. It's one of those little nuggets I look at, and it's, again, another time that, for me, it validates the authenticity of the Bible, that it was an eyewitness that just didn't say, well, he was asleep, but he was back there sleeping on a cushion. Jesus was tired. but it was his idea. So they were in this little body of water called the Sea of Galilee. It still exists. I've been there. This is what it looks like. And they were heading from this region up near Capernaum down to Gerasenes, this area, this small little group of towns and cities. And so that little journey there was probably about 10 or 10 and a half miles. And if you want to have some fun, pull up Google Earth and just draw a line between the two, and you can kind of see for yourself what the distance is here. So the Sea of Galilee is about 13 miles north and south in length and about 8 miles east-west. So they get in the boat and they start to cross over, and then all of a sudden, as the Sea of Galilee still does, this storm just swooped in on them. Now they were in this boat that you see. This is probably a pretty good depiction of what that boat were to look like that Jesus was in. He was there sleeping, and there's a place for him there in the back, I guess, to sleep, and they're headed across. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I always wondered, like, knowing kind of what these boats look like, how did they fit 12 or 13 or whatever, the disciples and Jesus? But I don't know if you noticed, there were several boats there going with him. But the point is, it was Jesus' idea. And here's the thing, when you follow Jesus, when you commit your life to Jesus, when you say, I'm going to follow Jesus, and there's a lot of terms for that we use these days. Some people use the term Christian. Some people use the word Christ follower. Some people say, I'm committed to Jesus. I've surrendered my life to Jesus. I've been born again. All these different terms that mean the same thing, that my life is in God's hands and I follow him and I go where he goes. Then when you're going where he goes, then you just do whatever his idea is. That's what really constitutes the life of a Christian, is we just go with God's ideas. And Jesus said, get in the boat, we're going across to the other side. That's significant because it wasn't the disciples' idea. It was Jesus' idea. And I don't know about you in your life right now, but I know a lot of times I get off track and I go, well, this is my idea and I want to do this and I want to go here and I want to experience this. And I have to keep reminding myself. And God has to keep reminding me in my own life that it's not about what I want. It's not about my ideas. It's about his ideas. It's about his direction. Because there's really three kinds of people in life. There's people that want to go their own way on their own. They just say, this is how I want to go. This is what I want to do. This is the way I want to live. And I don't really care to have God as a part of it because I want to kind of drive my own ship, so to speak, and go wherever I want to go. Follow my own ideas and follow my own dreams. Then you'll find there's another kind of person that says, well, I want to go, but I want God to go with me. I want God to go where I'm going because I don't want to be alone, and I know God and I believe in God and I trust God and I'm committed to God and I want him to go where I'm going. So wherever I choose to go, I don't want to be that person where I'm by myself and I'm alone and I've separated myself from God, but I want to be this person where God's going with me. But you'll notice there's another person that says, I'm going to go where God goes. So wherever God leads, that's where I want to go. Now this is the most unnatural of the three, because we were born with something within us that says, I want to do whatever I want to do. And if you've ever seen a 2-year-old, you would totally agree with that statement, that it comes naturally. That a 2-year-old could look you in the eye and take a cookie and be eating with crumbs all over her face. You ask them, did you have a cookie? No. Because we want to go our own way. But do we want to be the person that says, wherever Jesus goes, I go? Because that's not an easy path to take. It's not the most popular path to take. It's not a path that maybe even a lot of other people around you are taking. But let me tell you, when it's Jesus' idea, it will always work out. And you can mark that down. That when it's Jesus' idea, when it's Jesus' direction, when it's Jesus' instructions and calling, when he is leading the way, it will work out for you. But let me tell you where it won't work out. Is going by yourself or wanting God to go with you. Where it will work out is for you to go where God's going. So they're there, and all of a sudden this storm popped up. And this storm just suddenly surrounded them. They were immersed in this storm. Now, the Sea of Galilee, this is even a common occurrence today, that because of the geography of that place, it's 650 feet below sea level, and storms can just pop up, and this storm just popped up. Now, amongst the group of disciples were some guys that were very familiar with the water. They were fishermen. They had been out there. This wasn't new to them. But something about this particular storm had to have been different, because it caused such alarm that all of a sudden they panicked. They said, "What do we do?" Now, in the book of Matthew, in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 8, we also find this story. And in this story, Matthew uses a word to help us describe, to help us understand what these waves were like. He uses the Greek word. This part of the Bible is written originally in Greek, and it's this word seismos, which might be familiar to you. If you've ever heard the term seismology, it's the measuring of earthquakes. So Matthew says the waves were seismic in size, so to speak. So in other words, they're down in the trough of these waves that were probably high enough that maybe they couldn't even see over the top. So here they are in these massive, massive waves when this is happening. And even these experienced guys on the water are now saying, "What do we do? This storm just popped up around us, and now we're panicked." And they didn't know what to do other than to try to wake the teacher up. And they didn't even really know, as we know from the story, what he could do. And sometimes storms pop up in life. Sometimes storms pop up in the world. When you think about the world in which we live, I mentioned last week, if you're here, you're watching us online, I talked about meeting General Mark Welsh. And what he did, which I thought was so interesting, is he walked back through the last 100 years in the United States and talked about what it's like to lead and to live through disruption. We've been through a lot in the last 100 years. We tend to think, people that live at the time in which they live, well, this has never happened before, this kind of disruption. We're all experiencing this ongoing situation with COVID and everything surrounding it. But I want to take you back for a minute. Let's look at the last 100 years, starting with the 1910s. 1910s, World War I. Really a pretty unprecedented situation to see the entire world engulfed in a war where many, many, many lives were lost. And it really shifted a lot within our world, within power structures and nations and systems and leadership. And then we go to the 1920s, and in our country, this little thing called Prohibition that ended up really being a mess. And I don't know how much you know about Prohibition. It's kind of a fascinating story, but Prohibition is when they outlawed alcohol in the United States. And they went back and forth even a couple times. Now, I would just say this. Imagine how crazy it must have been with alcohol that they would amend the Constitution of the United States to outlaw it. I think I'm probably right. You maybe agree with me. People would lose their minds if we did that today, wouldn't they? Imagine living through that. Imagine how many everyday lives that affected to go through Prohibition. And then you go into the 1930s. And in 1929, in September, the stock market crashed. It was called Black Friday. Not the sales, but something much worse. In the 1930s, we plunged into what's called the Great Depression. The Great Depression, where unemployment got up to 1 out of 4 working people in the United States that couldn't find a job, that the stocks were down, that people, even in business, the stories were throwing themselves out of windows because things were so bad. And they lived through this decade. And my father was born and grew up, both my parents, during this time where they lived, and they've told me stories firsthand when they were alive about the Great Depression. Then we go into the 40s, World War II, which a lot of us are much more familiar with than World War I. And World War II, we're plunged into this crazy situation with leadership like Adolf Hitler and all the things that were happening around the world. Our entire world was engulfed. The United States gets pulled deeply into this conflict. Then in the 1950s, we go through the Korean War, and culture really starts to change, and we're going through, a continual conflict that's causing a disruption in the United States. And then you go into the 60s with assassinations and civil unrest and protests and Major things happening that still are shifting our society today, 50, 60 years later. Then you go into the 70s. This crisis of leadership with our president that never before had happened, where our president resigned. I want you to imagine, some of you know what it's like to live through something like that. Imagine a president of the United States resigning because he's not morally fit to lead, to the point where he had to resign. And so we go through that, and we go into inflation and gas lines where there wasn't enough gas. I want you to imagine how that would disrupt your everyday life. Then we go into the 80s and the Cold War. Now, growing up a little bit in the 80s, I would tell you that I remember drills in our schools. Young people, imagine this. A drill where you go and hide under your desk or go somewhere in the building to hide in case there was a nuclear war. And having grown up during that era, the impending idea that the world could be destroyed by humanity was something that was in the forefront of all of our minds as kids, and we grew up that way in the 80s. And then you go into the 90s. And you think about what was happening in the 90s, the Gulf War. We go back into another war after being out of war for so long. And then you go right into the new millennium. And in 2001, 9/11, which changed everything. And then we go into Afghanistan. So 9/11 in 2001, that really set the tone for the rest of the decade. Then you go into the next decade, the Great Recession. And many of you know what that was like. And many people, just like kind of like right now, there was so much change, people changing and losing their careers and losing money and losing their life savings. And Michigan, where we are here, 49th or 50th of all the state economies, and going through that. And now here we are in what I would call in the 20s, the Great Divide. We're in this time where it's like the Great Divide, where we can't agree on anything, and no one's happy, and there's anger and rage. And we all are voicing our opinions and spewing our ideas out on social media and attacking one another verbally and even physically. We're going through all this stuff. And my point in bringing up all this in the last 100 years is this. Life is full of disruptions. And life is full of storms. And maybe in your life, out of nowhere, a storm just popped up. And you really don't know what to do. You don't know how to react or to respond or what to say, and you're kind of overwhelmed. And maybe even like the disciples, where it's something you might even have been used to. But then something about this latest situation has just put you over the edge, and now you don't know what to do. Well, I'm here to say, God cares. The disciples asked a very interesting and poignant question in that moment, where they said, "Don't you care? Don't you care?" You ever said that to God? And I have a lot. God, do you care or not? Because it seems like I'm out here all on my own in this storm, and there's no help anywhere in sight. So what do? I feel alone. And I want to remind you, yes, God cares. Now here's something to think about. The disciples didn't know what Jesus could do. Did you catch that? I don't think they probably were thinking that Jesus would stand up and tell the storm to stop by their response that we see here, because after it happens, Jesus stands up. He's sleeping. They wake him up. He stands up and he says, "Quiet." And the storm stops. And then they look at each other and they go, "Who is this dude? How did this just happen?" They didn't understand. They didn't know. Now, here's the thing. Their vocabulary reflected their understanding of Jesus. And it's the same for you. It's the same for me. The vocabulary that we use about the storms that we're in. Your storm might be a financial thing where all of a sudden something flipped on you and it seems like you're in a corner and you don't know what to do. For some of you, that storm might be something pretty serious. You know, there's different levels of storms. There's kind of the annoying storms, the things that you think and your expectations don't match, like you just really believe the Lions are going to win, and then they let you down. You know, that's a small little storm. You should be used to that. Then you got another kind of storm, like you leave the house and you just get it remodeled, and then the bathroom floods and it ruins everything. Like, that's a storm. And then you got your serious ones. A divorce. And some of you might be going through that storm right now and you don't know what to do, and you're crying out to God for help, and it seems impossible. For some of you, it might be something that's happening to you as a parent, and it's a storm. And there's been conflict, and there's been words that have said that are really hurtful, and things that you may not remember. But it's a storm. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know what it is, but here's what I know. Jesus can handle your storm. He can handle it. He's got it. And let me say that a little bit more emphatically. Jesus can handle your storm. He's got your storm in hand. He's not sleeping. He's not paying attention. He's not removed. His eyes are fully fixed on you, and he knows what you're going through. And let me tell you, when your life is in his hands, he's got your storm. He can handle your storm. He knows what's happening. There's no bigger lie to think that God doesn't care. I think that's one of the things that just rages against our soul, is for the enemy of our soul to say God is not there and he doesn't care. And let me tell you, God cares. And God is there. He cares. He knows what you're going through. And he knows that this storm didn't just pop up on him by surprise. That is such comfort for me as a follower of Jesus, to know that he's got all those storms right in his hand. And I'm right there. And you know what? Whatever happens around me, whatever storm is brewing. Because here's the thing, the disciples had heard all the teachings of Jesus, but now something interesting happens here. They went from just knowing it to experiencing it. And I think some of us here, we just think, well, I just want to pop onto Daybreak Live or come to church, and I just want to get filled with all this knowledge and I can know about God. But listen, it's more than that. It's more about knowing. It's about experiencing. It's about living. It's about being out there in the wind and the waves and not knowing what's going to happen, and knowing that this boat will not flip over because you're in his hands, because he loves you, because he cares for you, because he's moved heaven and earth to show you that you're not alone. Jesus said to the disciples, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So if you've got a storm in your life, let me tell you, Jesus can handle it. Jesus can handle your storm. I want you to take comfort from the words of Isaiah 41. The words of the prophet written to the people of God. Take this. Receive it. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. All who rage against you will surely be ashamed and disgraced, and those who oppose you will be as nothing and perish. This storm that's raging against you will be as nothing. It will subside. It will end. There's good news around the corner. If you think this storm is never going to end, it will end. It will subside. God will calm the waters at the appropriate time, at the right time. God will speak. And that storm will subside. And you'll enjoy the peace that comes with the presence of God in ways that you could never know in any other way. And we just need to celebrate this today. We just need to celebrate the fact that Jesus can handle our storms, that he is with us, that he is for us, not against us. That God's not here to bring shame into your life. He's here to bring joy. He's here to bring victory. He's here to bring release. He's here to bring freedom. And we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate the fact that even if we're in the middle of the storm right now, we know that Jesus can handle any storm. Are you with me? That he can. And we're going to celebrate it. And I'm just so amazed at the group that God's given us here at Daybreak, and these wonderful people that come and serve every week and lead us. Thank you. So let's stand to our feet and let's celebrate. Let's do it.